All right, so ready to dive into something pretty fascinating.
Always up for a good deep dive.
Great. Today we're looking at these lectures, actually, from this philosopher-scientist. Really interesting stuff. And he thinks he's come up with a new existential theory, which is a pretty bold claim in itself.
Yeah, existential theories aren't exactly a dime a dozen. What's this one all about?
Well, that's the really interesting part. So the author, he claims that this theory is like so fundamental, like woven into the very fabric of reality itself.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what? He's saying any advanced civilization anywhere in the universe would stumble upon these same ideas.
Exactly.
Bold claim.
I love that kind of intellectual ambition, though, right? So where does he even begin to tackle something this big?
Well, he starts with something we can all relate to, our own existence. Remember Descartes? I think, therefore I am.
Oh, classic Descartes. Hard to argue with that.
Right. But it's more than just a catchy phrase. Descartes was onto something really profound, I think. Definitely. He highlighted that fundamental distinction between the thinker and the thought, the observer and the observed.
Exactly. And the author of these lectures, he kind of picks up where Descartes left off. He argues that this very distinction, the fact that we are separate entities experiencing the world, that this inherently limits our understanding of reality.
It's like we're trying to see the whole picture while looking through a tiny keyhole.
Perfect analogy.
We're limited by our own perspective, trapped inside our own little bubbles of perception.
Exactly. And that leads to one of the central concepts the author keeps coming back to, this idea of that of which all is part. He calls this reality with a capital R.
Okay, I like where this is going. So he's basically saying there's this ultimate, all-encompassing reality out there.
Yeah. And because of our inherent limitations as observers, we can never fully grasp or represent it.
It's like trying to draw a map of the entire universe while standing on a single grain of sand.
Right. You can try, but you're only ever going to capture a tiny, distorted fragment of the whole thing.
So how does he even begin to approach this concept of reality if it's so fundamentally beyond our grasp?
Well, he uses this visual tool. He calls it a size-time diagram.
A size-time diagram?
Yeah. Think of it like a graph, but instead of just X and Y axes, you have size on one axis and time on the other.
So everything that exists, all matter, energy, across all of time, is plotted on this diagram.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. Through a bunch of thought experiments and logical proofs, the author concludes that both the size and time axes have to be infinite.
Infinite. Hold on a second. So he's saying the universe is infinitely big, et and d, it's always existed?
That's what he's arguing, yeah.
Whoa, that's a lot to process.
I know. So we've got this infinite size time diagram, we've got the limitations of our perspective as observers, and to tie it all together, he introduces this concept of energy mass space-time.
Energy mass space-time, that sounds intense.
It is, kind of. But it builds on Einstein's famous EMCC.
Okay, everyone's heard of that, but how does it fit into all this?
Well, Einstein showed us that energy and mass are basically interchangeable, right? But the C part, the speed of light squared, that connects energy and mass to space-time itself.
So it's not just about energy and matter, but how they relate to the very fabric of the universe, to space and time themselves.
Exactly. And the author argues that this combined concept, energy, mass, space-time, represents the most fundamental stuff of reality.
Yeah.
And its inherent properties kind of dictate how everything in reality exists and interacts.
So we've got the infinite size time diagram, the inherent limitations of how we observe the universe, and this idea of energy mass space-time as the building block of it all.
It's like we're piecing together a giant cosmic puzzle.
A puzzle with infinite pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And these three concepts form the foundation of the author's whole existential theory.
And get this, when the author applies this theory to the Big Bang, things get even wilder.
Okay, wilder how? I mean, the Big Bang's already pretty wild on its own.
Right, but we usually think about it like, okay, everything started from nothing, this point of singularity.
Yeah, the universe explodes into being out of nowhere.
Exactly. But the author argues that true emptiness, like absolute nothingness, that contradicts the very nature of energy mass space-time.
So, no let there be light moment. No creation ex nihilo.
Nope. He's saying that because space-time is infinite, it can never be truly empty.
Okay, but if there's no starting point, then what's the Big Bang all about?
Well, instead of one singular event, he proposes a cyclical model of the universe. Big Bangs aren't unique. They happen over and over again.
Whoa, cyclical. So like the universe expands, then contracts, then boom, another Big Bang, and so on. Forever.
You got it, like a cosmic heartbeat, constantly expanding and contracting for all of infinity.
My brain hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, but if these cycles are happening all the time, why haven't we seen evidence of them?
Well, to explain that, he uses the Hubble law as an analogy, how galaxies are moving away from each other.
Right, the universe is expanding, and pretty fast, too.
Exactly. So the author says, as this expansion keeps going, eventually everything spreads out so much it passes beyond what he calls our event horizon.
Event horizon. Like a black hole event horizon.
Kind of. It's the boundary beyond which we can't observe or interact with anything anymore. So things move beyond our event horizon as the universe expands, creating pockets of space that seem empty to us.
Okay, so these pockets aren't really empty, they're just beyond our ability to see them.
Exactly. And within these seemingly empty pockets, he thinks new big bangs are happening all the time.
So it's like the universe is constantly refreshing itself, creating and recreating in these vast spaces we can't even perceive.
You got it. And this cycle, he argues, keeps repeating along that time axis on the infinite-sized time diagram forever.
Okay, so the universe has no beginning and no end. It just keeps going and going. But where does life fit into all of this? I mean, it seems impossible that life would arise over and over again in these cycles.
That's where it gets even more mind-blowing. The author argues that with an infinite-sized time diagram, life arising isn't just possible, it's basically guaranteed.
So life isn't just a random accident, it's baked into the structure of the universe itself. I like that.
It's a pretty amazing idea, right? And then he takes it even further. He looks at evolution, but focuses on something he calls the power principle.
Power principle? Sounds kind of ominous.
Maybe a little, but it's basically the drive of living organisms to control their own reproduction.
To make sure their genes get passed on.
Exactly. And the author thinks this simple principle can explain so much about life, everything from the emergence of viruses to the development of complex societies.
So tiny viruses and packs of wolves, all driven by this power principle. That's a pretty big claim.
It is, but he actually makes a really compelling case, tracing how the power principle has driven the evolution of life, leading to more and more complexity.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But how does it all relate back to the big picture, to that existential theory?
Well, that's the core of his argument. He's convinced that if this existential theory is true, then any advanced civilization in the universe would eventually arrive at the same conclusions. It's like this logic is built into reality itself.
So it's not just us humans thinking this way, but potentially every intelligent being out there. It's a universal understanding.
Exactly. Which raises a pretty incredible possibility. A common worldview shared by all intelligent life, a foundation for connection and communication across the universe.
That would be incredible. We could understand each other on a level we can barely imagine right now, just based on this shared understanding of how reality works. So much to think about from this deep dive. It really does kind of challenge how we see the universe, you know?
It definitely shakes things up.
It does. But I mean, where do we go from here? Like, how does knowing all this change anything for us day to day?
That's the big question, right? The author thinks that grappling with these ideas, understanding these truths, it can lead to a pretty profound shift in perspective.
So even though we can never really wrap our heads around the universe being infinite, just trying to, that changes how we see things.
Exactly. It makes us realize, wow, there's so much more than we can ever grasp. And that realization can be transformative. It can change how we relate to the world, to each other.
Instead of getting hung up on what we don't know, it's about embracing that vastness, the mystery of it all.
Right. It's about approaching the world with a sense of awe, of wonder, recognizing that, hey, we're not just isolated individuals. We're all part of this incredible tapestry connected across space and time.
It's like we're all made of stardust, but it's even deeper than that.
Way deeper. And that feeling of connection, it can be so liberating. It helps us move past those limitations of our own individual points of view. We start to see ourselves as part of something so much bigger.
It's like instead of focusing on this one little detail, you zoom out and see the whole picture.
Exactly. You gain a whole new appreciation for the complexity, the beauty of it all. And the author believes that this shift in perspective can really change how we act, how we treat each other, how we interact with the world around us.
If we understand that we're all connected, like truly connected in this infinite reality, it should change how we treat each other, right?
That's the idea. It fosters empathy, compassion, understanding. It emphasizes our shared responsibility for the future, for taking care of each other and this planet.
It's like we need a whole new way of thinking, a new operating system for humanity to help us navigate all the challenges we're facing.
Maybe this theory is the upgrade we need.
Maybe it is. And, it makes you wonder, if this theory really is universal like the author claims, what would happen if more people understood it? Could it create a global shift in consciousness, a new enlightenment?
That's an incredible thought. What if this understanding became part of our education, our art, our culture? Imagine how differently we might approach global problems, how much more we might cooperate and work together if we all saw ourselves as part of this grand, interconnected reality.
Wow. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to a whole new way of seeing things.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. It's these big existential questions that really push us to think differently, to expand our horizons.
I have a feeling I'm going to be thinking about all this for a long time. Thanks for taking us on this journey.
The journey's never over. Keep asking those big questions, keep exploring, keep looking up at the stars and feeling that sense of wonder.